Winter hit early that year, the kind of winter that doesn't ask permission and doesn't care about schedules, meetings, or HOA rulebooks. Snow started falling before sunrise, thick and heavy, coating everything in silence. By the time most people were still asleep, I was already out in my snowplow, clearing driveways and side roads like I'd done for years. This wasn't a hobby truck or some weekend toy. This plow was my livelihood, my investment, and my responsibility. I owned it outright, maintained it myself, and relied on it every winter to keep my small contracting business alive. One of my regular routes happened to include a private road leading into a nearby HOA neighborhood. The city wouldn't touch it because it was technically private property, and the HOA had gone through 3 contractors in 2 seasons. Too expensive, too slow, too unreliable. Eventually, they came to me. I signed a contract, set my rates, and made it very clear that I cleared when storms hit, not when committee members woke up. They agreed, at least on paper. That morning, I finished plowing their main road just after sunrise. Emergency lanes were open, entrances clear, and everything looked good. Exhausted, I parked my truck on the side of a public street near my house, legally, with permits visible and lights off. I went inside to grab coffee and warm up before heading back out. I was inside for less than an hour. That's when my phone started buzzing nonstop. A neighbor texted first, then another. Finally, I got a call from a tow company asking if I was the owner of the plow truck being removed for multiple HOA parking violations. I thought it was a joke. I wasn't parked in the HOA. I wasn't on their road. I wasn't even on their side of the entrance. None of that mattered, apparently. By the time I got back outside, the damage was already done. My truck had been dragged improperly, the plow frame twisted, hydraulic lines leaking red fluid onto the pavement. The tow driver shrugged and handed me a notice printed with the HOA's logo. They said it was abandoned and violating overnight rules, he told me. Overnight rules. During a snowstorm. I stood there in the cold, staring at thousands of dollars in damage, my work vehicle disabled, and my entire day ruined. No warning. No call. No ticket on the windshield. Just immediate enforcement, maximum force. I called the HOA office and got voicemail. I emailed. I documented everything. Photos, video, timestamps, tow receipts, damage estimates. All of it. What really got me wasn't just the cost. It was the arrogance. The assumption that they could touch my equipment, interfere with my work, and face zero consequences. They genuinely believed their authority extended beyond their gates, beyond logic, beyond reality. And at that exact moment, as snow clouds rolled back in and forecasts worsened, I realized something they clearly hadn't. They had just destroyed the only snowplow willing to clear their road. By mid-morning, the snow started coming down again, heavier this time, angrier. Weather alerts lit up everyone's phones, warning of whiteout conditions by afternoon. I was on the phone with my mechanic, who confirmed what I already knew. My plow wasn't going anywhere today. Bent mount, ruptured hydraulic line, electrical damage from the careless tow. Best case scenario, 2 days. Worst case, a week. Either way, I was done for this storm. That's when the HOA president finally called me back. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't apologize. Her first words were, "Why haven't you finished the secondary roads yet?" I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was unreal. I calmly explained that her HOA had my truck towed, damaged it, and effectively shut down snow removal. There was a long pause, followed by the most dismissive response I'd ever heard. "Well, you were in violation. That's not our problem." Not their problem. I reminded her slowly that my truck was parked on a public street, legally, and that the HOA had no jurisdiction there. She brushed it off and said their security contractor had authority to act if they believed a vehicle was associated with a violation. Associated. Not proven. Not confirmed. Just believed. Then she said something that flipped a switch. "Well, if you don't finish plowing, we'll just find someone else and deduct damages from your contract." That's when I pulled out the contract. Clause 14. Emergency interference. Any action by the HOA that prevents service voids their right to penalties and transfers liability for delays and damages directly to them. I had insisted on that clause after dealing with HOAs before. I read it to her word for word. She went quiet again, then snapped back with, "Our lawyer will handle that." Perfect. By early afternoon, the snow was relentless. Temperatures dropped fast, and meltwater from earlier plowing began refreezing. That's when the real problem started. Not for me, but for them. Their neighborhood sits slightly downhill, with older homes and outdated drainage systems. They rely on some pumps to keep basements dry during heavy snowmelt. Those pumps require power, maintenance, and access. And most importantly, they require passable roads. Roads I normally keep clear. As the snow piled up, residents started calling the HOA. Then they started calling me. Missed calls, voicemails, panicked messages asking when I'd be back. One guy said his elderly mother couldn't get out. Another said emergency services had already warned they wouldn't enter if the roads stayed blocked. I forwarded every message directly to the HOA president with one simple reply attached: unable to operate due to HOA-caused equipment damage. I didn't lift a finger. Not out of spite, but because I legally couldn't. No truck. No plow. No obligation. By evening, the first basements flooded. One pump failed. Then another. Snowmelt backed up. Ice clogged drains. Water crept into finished basements, soaking drywall, carpets, electrical panels. Residents posted photos in the HOA group chat. Panic turned into anger. Anger turned into blame. And every road still sat untouched, buried under snow and ice. At 9:47 p.m., my phone rang again. This time, the HOA president was no longer confident. Her voice was tight, shaking. She asked, very carefully, if there was any way I could come back out. I told her the truth. There is. As soon as my truck is repaired, and as soon as the HOA accepts full liability in writing. Silence. Outside, snow kept falling. Inside their neighborhood, water kept rising. And for the first time all day, the HOA realized something critical. Rules don't clear roads. Power doesn't move snow. And intimidation doesn't work when you need help. By sunrise, the situation had gone from bad to catastrophic. Overnight temperatures plunged well below freezing. The standing water in flooded basements turned into slush, then ice. Burst pipes followed. Garage doors froze shut. One homeowner tried forcing his and snapped the track clean off. Another posted a video of water pouring down his basement stairs like a waterfall, his voice shaking as he filmed. The HOA group chat exploded. People weren't asking anymore. They were demanding. Why weren't the roads cleared? Why wasn't emergency access restored? Why was the only plow operator in the area suddenly unavailable? And for the first time, residents started tagging the HOA board directly instead of me. That's when the narrative cracked. Someone shared the tow receipt. Someone else posted photos of my damaged snowplow sitting in the impound lot. Then came screenshots of my forwarded messages to the HOA president, clearly time-stamped hours before the worst flooding began. It became impossible to spin. By mid-morning, the HOA president sent out an official notice blaming unexpected contractor delays. That lasted about 6 minutes. I replied publicly, attaching the contract, the damage report from my mechanic, and the clause she dismissed so confidently the day before. Clause 14, highlighted in yellow. Then I added a single line beneath it. Service interruption caused by HOA enforcement action. Liability transferred per agreement. The chat went dead. Behind the scenes, things got frantic. I received 3 voicemails from different board members, all with very different tones than the day before. One tried to sound friendly. One sounded desperate. One went straight to threats, warning me that I'd never work in this county again. I forwarded that one to my lawyer. Around noon, the city stepped in. Emergency services flagged the neighborhood as limited access due to unsafe road conditions. No ambulances unless life-threatening. No fire trucks without police escort. That label alone sent shockwaves through the community. Home insurance companies started asking questions. Adjusters wanted timelines. And timelines pointed straight back to the tow. That's when the HOA tried their last move. They hired an out-of-area plow crew. Guys who didn't know the roads, didn't know the drainage, and definitely didn't know the terrain. They showed up with light-duty trucks, got stuck within 15 minutes, and blocked the main entrance entirely. One of them clipped a fire hydrant buried under snow. Water sprayed everywhere before freezing solid. The police came. Again. This time, no one was calling me. By late afternoon, I finally got the call I'd been expecting. Not from the HOA president, but from their attorney. His tone was smooth, careful, almost apologetic. He asked for my version of events off the record. I gave it to him. Every step, every warning, every ignored message. And when I finished, I told him exactly what it would take for me to resume service once my truck was repaired. Written liability acceptance, immediate reimbursement for damages, and a formal acknowledgement that the HOA had no authority over my vehicle. He didn't argue. He just said, "I'll be in touch." As the sun dipped and the temperature dropped again, the neighborhood sat in silence. Dark houses, frozen streets, flooded basements slowly turning into insurance claims. And the HOA board finally understood something they should have known from the start. You don't punish the person who keeps your world running, especially in a storm. Night fell hard, and with it came the real fear. The power grid was still unstable, the streets were sheets of ice, and half the neighborhood was now without heat because flooded basements had taken furnaces offline. People who'd been loud and arrogant just 24 hours earlier were suddenly quiet, posting photos of space heaters plugged into extension cords, asking if anyone had extra blankets, wondering aloud if insurance would even cover this mess. That's when the HOA president tried damage control. She sent out a long email blaming miscommunication, unforeseen weather escalation, and third-party service failures. Not once did she mention towing my snowplow. Not once did she accept responsibility. She ended it with a bolded line asking residents to remain calm and cooperative. It backfired immediately. Residents replied all. Screenshots came out. Someone posted her original violation notice where she'd threatened fines if my truck wasn't removed within 30 minutes. Another resident dug up the HOA bylaws and highlighted the section stating snow removal contractors were exempt from parking enforcement during active weather events. The comments turned brutal. People weren't mad anymore. They were furious. Basement losses were being estimated in the tens of thousands. Mold concerns were already being raised. One family had to relocate to a hotel because their ground floor was uninhabitable. And every single loss traced back to one decision. Hers. Around 9 p.m., my phone rang again. Same attorney. Different tone. This time, he wasn't asking questions. He was offering terms. The HOA would pay for the full repair of my snowplow. They would cover lost income for the downtime. They would issue a written apology acknowledging improper enforcement. And most importantly, they wanted me back on the roads immediately. I told him no. Not yet. I explained that my truck was still an impound. My mechanic hadn't cleared it for operation, and even if it had been ready, I wasn't stepping foot back into that neighborhood without something stronger than promises. That's when he agreed to an emergency board meeting, same night, virtual, recorded. They invited me to attend. I logged in 10 minutes late on purpose. Faces filled the screen. Tired. Stressed. Pale. The HOA president looked like she hadn't slept at all. When I joined, the arguing stopped. Every eye turned toward me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten anyone. I simply laid out facts. I showed the contract again. I showed the timestamps. I showed the tow receipt. I showed the city's limited access notice. Then I said one sentence that ended the meeting's resistance entirely. If this goes to court, discovery will not be kind to you. Silence. The board voted on the spot to suspend all enforcement actions against contractors, reimburse every affected homeowner's deductible, and remove the HOA president's authority over operations pending investigation. She didn't protest. She couldn't. By midnight, the agreement was signed. Digital signatures, official letterhead, no wiggle room. My truck was released from impound within the hour, fees waived after a call from the city. As I drove past the neighborhood entrance, still iced over, still dark, I didn't feel victorious. I felt validated. Because storms don't care about power trips. Water doesn't respect bylaws. And consequences don't wait for apologies. The HOA had learned the hard way. And the final bill, financial and personal, was still coming. By morning, the storm had moved on, but the aftermath hadn't. I was back in my truck before sunrise, engine humming, plow freshly repaired, salt loaded, lights cutting through the gray. The same streets that had rejected me days earlier were now desperate for help. This time, no one questioned my presence. No one mentioned permits, violations, or authority. Gates were open. Roads were silent. The power dynamic had completely flipped. I cleared every street under contract. Slowly. Properly. By the book. Residents stood on porches wrapped in blankets, watching like spectators at a parade they never wanted. Some waved. Some looked embarrassed. A few avoided eye contact altogether. I didn't gloat. I didn't rush. I worked exactly as agreed. Nothing more, nothing less. By noon, emergency vehicles could finally move freely. Utility crews accessed flooded homes. Some pumps were replaced. Basements stopped filling. But the damage? That was already locked in. Insurance adjusters rolled in by the dozen. And then the lawsuit started. Not against me. Against the HOA. Homeowners filed claims for negligence, breach of duty, and reckless enforcement. Contractors who'd been blocked during the storm joined in. The city issued a formal reprimand for interfering with emergency response infrastructure. The HOA's insurer reserved rights, meaning they might not cover any of it. Within 2 weeks, the HOA president resigned. No announcement. No farewell email. Her name quietly vanished from the board page like it had never been there. An interim committee took over operations and sent out a notice acknowledging critical leadership failures during an emergency event. That wording came straight from a lawyer. I got paid in full. Repairs. Lost time. Additional compensation for reputational harm. It all arrived in certified checks, one after another. The contract was amended to include a new clause. No HOA authority may interfere with snow removal operations under any circumstances. It was unanimous. Funny how fast bylaws change when the consequences hit home. A month later, I drove through that same neighborhood after another snowfall. This time, residents were outside early. Cars already moved, sidewalks shoveled ahead of schedule, HOA signs mysteriously gone from the curb. One guy even brought me coffee. The lesson wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about winning. It was about reality. You can't find your way out of a flood. You can't threaten your way through a storm. And you can't bully essential services without eventually paying for it. HOAs love control until they meet something stronger than paperwork. Weather, physics, liability, and professionals who know their worth. I never asked for special treatment. I asked for basic respect and the right to do my job. They chose power over sense, and the neighborhood paid the price. Now, every winter, when the forecast turns ugly, I get the same email from that HOA's new board. Please let us know if there's anything you need. There isn't. I already have what matters. A contract, a reputation, and proof that when authority oversteps, consequences don't ask permission. Storms come and go, but lessons like that, they stick.